At 16, a friend of mine that I had worked with told me, like, come move out with me, it'll be fun, you know. I felt like that was my way to escape all the sadness that was just going on. And the person that I was living with, I soon found out, like, this was a gang member house. Like, there was drugs and partying, and like, it was a scene that I wanted nothing to do with.
Alicia, thank you for your time to be here. This conversation's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
Because about 20 years ago, you emailed me?
Yeah, it would have been like 17 years ago.
17 years ago saying, hey, can I share my story?
Yeah.
So sorry for not getting back to you sooner.
It was all part of God's plan, right?
I heard your story recently and I just thought, man, I was just so moved and I thought, you have to share it. So bring us back, share with us your faith journey, because I know people are going to really be blessed by the special grace that God has done in your life.
Yeah. So I grew up in a Catholic family, but we weren't really like hardcore practicing Catholics. We kind of just did the motion, went to church on Sunday. And then other than that, we didn't really do much with our faith. And then our life kind of took a toll when I was in grade 6 and I had a family member struggling with addictions. And that's where it brought my mom to a full conversion. And next thing you know, our TVs are being replaced with statues of Mother Mary and Saint Joseph and Jesus, and we're getting on our knees every night praying the rosary. And it was, it was really changing. Like, it was really hard for us at the beginning because we were like, what is this? Like, we kind of could do so much more freedom before, but there's something really special about how that came about, because that brought into me knowing deep down in my heart that like there was a Jesus who loved us and who died for us. And even though I didn't believe it wholeheartedly yet, it kind of plays into my story later on. So fast forward to both my parents having a strong conversion at that point. And then I went into high school and it was really hard for me having a brother who I didn't know if he was going to be alive the next week. We were getting calls all the time from him being in and out of the hospital or missing. It was like something that our family really struggled with. And so I held in a lot. I didn't want to be causing more pain for my family. So when I started struggling in high school with just peer pressure and bullies and just like things that were really affecting me mentally, I kind of didn't know how to bring that to my parents, because every time I'd come home, it was like, well, we were dealing with something with my brother, and I just didn't want to add on to it, even though I know that sounds so silly now because they would have held me with open arms, right? And so at 16, a friend of mine that I had worked with just at a fast food place, very part-time, told me, like, come move out with me, it'll be fun, And at the time, it was like, that would be so much out of my character to do so, but I felt like that was my way to escape all the sadness that was just going on. And even though I loved my family and there was nothing, there was nothing wrong with being at home per se. It was just like, I felt the heaviness and I was silently suffering, and I thought that would be the answer. And so at 16, I had moved out, and it was very abrupt, and I didn't know what I was walking into at that time. So my friend had actually been living there, but she had moved out within a week of me going there. So now I'm left in this stranger's house, like apartment. And
are you living with other people?
She had a man living there, and I didn't know who he was. Like, she was just like, oh, he's a really great person, and just come move in with us. There's a spare bedroom. And I was like, okay, sounds great. And all I had was like a duffel bag with my clothes, like no furniture. Like, I slept on my clothes. Like, it didn't seem appeasing. Like, why would I want to do that? And so for me, after about a week of staying there, I really realized, like, after she had disappeared, like to this day, I actually have no idea where she went. She quit her job. She left, and like never heard from her since. And so I'm sitting there in this place, and I'm like, I'm a very quiet person at the time, I'm very kept to myself. So it was very abnormal for me to be in these situations and not be able to like have a voice. I kind of felt very scared and whatnot. And the person that I was living with, I soon found out like this was a gang member house. Like, there was people in gangs that were in the city, and there was drugs and partying, and like it was a scene that I wanted nothing to do with. I later found out that they had already been pre-evicted from the place. So I was like, well, that's my ticket. Like, that's my ticket out. At the end of the month, I'm going to go back home. Everything's going to be fine. But I had all this guilt inside of me for leaving my family and like causing them more pain, which that was supposed to be the opposite. I was leaving to like not cause them pain, but it was just really hard that I had left home and I'd hurt them very much. Even though they were waiting with open arms to accept me back, it was like that guilt really started eating at me that I couldn't really forgive myself. And so fast forward a few weeks and the time came where we were time to get out of the apartment, and I had seen a lot of crazy things in there despite all of that, and I was just ready to kind of leave. And when I was leaving, the man that I was staying with at the time kind of just said, like, "You're coming with me." And I was like, "What? No, it's okay. I have a place to go home." And he was like, "No, you're coming with me." And he put my bag in his car, and like, that was that. And I was, I had a lot of fear in me. I'd seen a lot of stuff. I knew what these people were about, and I didn't know how to leave. So next thing you know, I'm in a vehicle driving to the next place that we're going to stay and have a place called home, apparently. And it took me to a place where eventually I started feeling like there was no way out. Even though nothing had happened to me yet, it was just this fear-based relationship of somebody that I know is capable of all these things. And next thing you know, I was sexually abused for the first time. And that was something that I hadn't even had like a boyfriend prior to that or anything. Like, this was like a whole new world for me. And I didn't know that such evil had existed in my mind. Like, I thought me knowing about, my brother's addictions and things like that were something that was terrifying in this world, but this was like a whole different realm of things. So that was the beginning of it. And from that moment on, for about 6 months straight, I was to do whatever he had wanted, whenever he wanted. And that's kind of how all of my pain and everything started. So,
did you have any connections with your mom and dad during that time?
So they were amazing. They would sit outside the building that they knew I lived in, praying and asking me to come home. And like, it's really hard when I look back now. It was guilt that kept me from going there. Like, I was so ashamed that I hurt them more, knowing that I was leaving because there was already so much hurt in the family. And even though it was like a footstep away that I could have ran to them and been comforted and, protected by them, it's like crazy how our emotions and guilt and shame can really make us stay put and think that like we don't deserve like that. We don't deserve to do that. And next thing you know, I'm in this position that now I'm even further in. So
it makes me think of like, sorry. Okay, it makes me think of so many like prodigal sons out there who just like are not going home to the Father because of the guilt and the shame that they have from the life that they've been living, and I just feel like Satan really has a stronghold on people, like preventing them from going home to God.
So you're in this apartment, you feel like you can't leave, there's a lot of guilt, and then you're also afraid to leave?
Yeah. I just seen a lot of crazy evenings. Like, there's nights where I stayed in the park all night long because I was not okay to go back into that apartment. So I'd stay there until I knew that the party would be over, and then I could come in and maybe sleep a little bit before I had to work or something. So we're in this new place now, and then I was sexually assaulted for the first time. And I remember thinking, okay, like, I can't believe this happened. I'm in utterly shock. I'm in a lot of pain. And how can I leave now? But then I didn't know that it would continue on. So it was like the next day when, he would kind of just snap his finger and direct me to where he wanted me to go. And I was like, wait, what? This happens? Like, this happens in real life, and I've seen a lot of movies and it in the past, and it's like, I didn't think that it could actually exist in real life. And so that lasted a whole 6 months of just anything. I just felt I was no longer a human. I felt like an object to be used whenever, wherever, and I was very much mentally not okay anymore. And so it brought me to a point where I no longer wanted to be here anymore. And so I made a very firm decision in my heart and in my mind that I can't do this. Like, I was like, unspeakable things had happened to me, and I could never go tell the people that I love what I've been through, and I don't know how I could ever overcome it. And this is the best way. This is the best scenario for me. So I wrote my goodbye letters to my family, and that very evening, the night before I had planned to take my life, I went for a walk, and I felt this excruciating pain in my stomach. And I truly believe that was God making me aware, because for the first time in that whole 6 months, I was like, could I be pregnant? It didn't cross my mind prior. And when I thought that, in my heart, I was like, well, I'm 100% okay taking my own life, but I'm 100% okay. I'm not okay taking this child's life because he's innocent. And I was like, I didn't know what to do with that. So I was like, I have to confirm this. So I went to a walk-in clinic about a half a block from where I was living at the time the next morning. And the doctor came in and said, congratulations, like you're expecting. And he had a big smile on his face. And I remember just being like destroyed inside, being like, how can I do this now? Like my plan is ruined. What the heck? Like what am I supposed to do with this? And so I ended up telling my family right away through text. And, you know, of course they were like, we support you. Like we'll help you. We can get you out of this situation. And I know that they know it was really bad. But again, nobody really knew the extent of everything. And so they were praying, and I kind of just said something like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how I can do this. So I think that they thought, like, what's she going to do? Maybe she won't keep the baby. Maybe this will happen. So that night I went to sleep, and I was crying. I remember I was in my closet. Sometimes I would hide it. I know it sounds silly, but that was my safe place to be, kind of like that people would appear that I'm not home. And I didn't ever want to be at home when I was in that place, so that I didn't have to do anything and whatnot. So I was sitting in my closet crying out to God, being like, what do you want me to do? Like, how is this my life right now? Like, why would you do this? Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And I heard this child's voice. Like, it was like the movies, like, you know, in the movies where you really hear, they portray, like, it was wholeheartedly like that. The entire room was filled with this voice. And it was just this child's voice that said, Mommy, don't let me go. I just want you to love me. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, I knew in my heart that I'm going to have this baby, but I had no idea what that looked like. I knew that it wasn't going to take away my pain. I knew that it wasn't going to be easy. There was all this messy situation to still figure out. But I knew in that moment that I needed to hear those words to know that, like, he was worth fighting for in this situation. So I then, 9 months later, gave birth to a beautiful boy.
Are you still in this apartment when this is happening?
No. So throughout that whole relationship situation, it was like I was still very much abused throughout my pregnancy. I only gained 20 pounds in my pregnancy. And I had a 5-pound baby. So at the time, you could tell that I was just not healthy. And it was really hard. My abuser went from telling me he's going to force me to have an abortion, that it's going to ruin his life with other women and his life with his gang and everything else, to then telling me, you know what, you're Catholic. Like, I remember he said these specific words. He's like, you're Catholic. Like, you can only be with one person. Like, if I'm the person that's with you, like, you have to be with me. And I was like, at this point, in a victim mindset, you are completely broken down to absolutely nothing. So whatever is being told to you and if it seems like there could be something good or some type of comfort in those words of some point, you believe it. You're like this battered, broken person that has been, you know, beat to nothing. And if you hear one good thing, that's why so many people have such a hard time leaving these types of situations, because their abusers will be the person that hurts them, but they're also the person that shows them that little bit of comfort just to keep them going. So here I am thinking I have to be with this person. Like, that's what this person is telling me, and I need to do that. And so it was a very, very hard 9 months of pregnancy. I was an absolute mess. But I had family who constantly was praying for me and reaching out and, you know, having me for meals and trying their absolute hardest to bring me home. And about a month before I was to give birth, I had a dear friend of mine from the Catholic Church take me for a little drive, and he was telling me like, "You, please, Alicia, like you gotta go home. You're gonna end up dead in this relationship. Like, please, for the sake of your baby." And I remember hearing those words, and like the very next night, I'm at home, and there was another roommate now in the house, and his mom was a lawyer, and we didn't talk really. Like, we saw each other passing the house once in a while, but like we weren't close or anything. And I guess he knew everything that was going on. He could hear everything that was happening, and he knew that I was being abused severely. And he came in my room one night when my abuser at the time was working away, and I'm 8 months pregnant, and he goes, "Pack your bags." And I said, "What?" And he's like, "Pack all of your bags. Where do your parents live?" And I was like, "They're in Lake." And he's like, "Because you're going home." He's like, "I hear and see everything. You're going to end up dead. Your baby's going to end up dead. You need to go home right now." And he wouldn't leave my room until I packed my bags. So that's how I ended up back at home a month before my delivery of my son. And it doesn't mean that I didn't have the voice of the abuser constantly telling me that, "Why did you leave home?" Like, I kind of had to lie my way out of it. "Oh, well, I'm homesick. I'm ready to give birth right away. I'm really homesick. I need my family," and kind of make up something. But I knew my mind. It was like one day I knew I needed to go home and be with my family. The next day I was resorting back to, "Well, I can't leave. Like, that it will ruin this. He's going to do this to me. I'm living out of fear again, and I know that I have to go back." And so it was just like a very big mix up of feelings and emotions and everything like that. So and then I got into labor. It was actually on a Sunday, and my water broke at Mass. I don't know if you guys remember, because I feel like you guys were there, but I'm not sure. But it was when I went up for, when he said the blood of Christ, my water broke. It's kind of funny, but I just remember running back to the bathroom crying, and a good friend of mine, Carmen, comes running into the bathroom. "Are you in labor?" And I said, "No, but my water broke, so that means it's coming," right? And I was so scared, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." So the very next day I had my son, and that was kind of the beginning where in the hospital, a great group of people, I guess they could tell from the second I was in there that I was in a severely abusive relationship. I don't know how fully, but they advocated for me. They pulled me aside. They kicked him out of the hospital completely from things that was going on, and they looked at me and said, "You need to fight for your life right now. Like you're not guaranteed to have it in this type of relationship, and your baby needs you." And that was one of the first times that I really received that, was somebody stepping in. It was like I needed that. I needed somebody, and even though my parents did that all the time, it was like I needed someone on the outside to be like, "Hey, we see what's going on," without me having to tell them. And they walked me through the steps of like what I could do to protect myself and everything. And so I have this baby, and he's beautiful, and he's this tiny little human being. And it was really hard. It was really hard for me to connect to him. I'm mentally very unwell. I'm going through so many things, and I felt like I didn't get to share what was going on. So there was a whole whack of people that like made up their mind about me. I was the 16-year-old girl that left home and got pregnant with her boyfriend. And there's this story that people made up about me. And that, I think, was like one of the hardest things throughout my life, is that people made up their mind about me not knowing. And that stuck with me throughout all of the years, because it was like nobody knew the truth, so then I started to have to hide it, right? So it was just like, yeah, I was pregnant at 16 and so on and so on. No one really knew what was going on. And so that was a really big burden for me. And then throughout the pregnancy, I lived at home, or not pregnancy, sorry. After I had my son, I was living at home, and so much was going on. I was back and forth. One day I was telling myself, like, I can't live at home. Like, I have to listen to what this person is saying, and he wants me to move home with him and all these things. And it was just back and forth. And eventually he ended up moving, which was a blessing in disguise. It had to do with some gang activity that had happened to him, and he had moved out of state. So I was, in my mind, free, but now I needed the healing to come. And I didn't fully turn to God throughout all those things. I was still struggling with understanding how do I begin to heal from this? How do I be a good mom to to my son? And how do I move forward from everything that had happened? And I felt like I didn't have the time to do that. Like, it was just like, you're a full-time mom now and you need to do all these things. And, you know, I look back and it's like, despite me thinking there wasn't all this time, like God had a purpose and a plan. And despite me thinking, oh, you needed to have this or this or this, I had the support, I had the people, I had the community that was really helping me in those moments of those hard days where I felt like I couldn't be at my best. And so we had moved out of town to a small town for a couple of years when my son would have been about 16 months old. And
that was with your mom and dad?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was still living with them and my sister. So we'd moved there kind of to get away from everything, kind of just to have some peace, get out of the whole group of people that kind of knew who I was and what had happened. And when I was out there, I was very much hurting. Like, you could tell I was masking my pain, you know, like I was this broken person that knew I loved being a mother, but also had all this hidden pain and feelings and things. And counseling didn't really go well back then at the time. I couldn't find someone that I connected with. So I was just struggling. That's the kind of the easiest way to put it. And so I had chosen to leave home to kind of go stay at a friend's house for a bit, just get back in the city. And
with your son?
I was planning to take him, but my mom, I guess she heard me getting up that morning, and I had Kaden in the car seat, and I turned around to grab him because my ride's outside. I was kind of sneaking out early because I knew they were going to be like, why are you leaving? I wasn't leaving for good. I was just leaving to go stay at a friend's house in the city. And my mom said, no, you're not taking him. And I looked at her and I was like, he's my son. But I remember she's like, Alicia, whatever you're going through right now, like, he doesn't need to be a part of that. And I don't know what's going on. And I just remember crying, and I just left the house and I was like, okay. And so there was a period where I didn't see my son for almost 3 weeks. And I had a picture of him in my wallet that I cried every night to, wondering like, why did God choose me to be his mother? Why did all this happen? And I just masked myself, and I was drinking and just kind of hanging around all these friends that told me, you know, you need to let loose and do all these things. And it brought myself to a moment where I was vulnerable again, and I was alone. And my abuser at the time found out that I had left home, and he flew down instantly. So next thing you know, I have him back telling me all of these things, that he's so sorry and that he didn't mean to hurt me, didn't mean to treat me the way that he did. And that, again, though, like, we are supposed to be together. We have a child. Like, you can't be with anyone else. Like, that's in your faith. And I'm at my absolute lowest again. So, of course, in my mind, I'm like, is this what God is showing me to do? Like, I was just so not in the right frame of mind that those words seemed, okay, is this what I'm supposed to do? And so he had bought me a plane ticket to where he had lived and told me, you know, it's a 2-way ticket, like, come and go whenever, bring Kaden and all these things. And I decided after a couple of weeks to do that. And despite obviously everyone warning me and telling me how bad of an idea it was, but it was really in my mind, like, in a victim's mindset, you always think like, what if they did change? What if this is supposed to happen? And at the time I had blocked everything that had happened to me in those 6 months, and there was no anger. I wasn't at the stage of like dealing with it yet. So it just didn't actually arise to think logically in the situation. So I flew down to where he had been living, and nothing had changed. There was no 2-way ticket. There was a 1-way ticket. And I soon found out that like nothing's changed. He's treating me the same way. He continued to sexually abuse me. And at that moment, a week went in, and next thing you know, I had found out that I was pregnant with my second child. And when I found that out, I remember texting my family, and all I said was, I need out for good. I'm pregnant again, and like, I never want to go back. Like, how do I get home? And I remember, I think they left within hours. Like, my dad got off work, they got in the car with my sister, and they drove, I think it was like 18 hours. And so during that moment, I had went and contacted a friend on Facebook that I'd went to kindergarten with at the time. Like, I just knew that her location was where this location was. So I just said, are you by here? Can you help me and like come pick me and my son up? And she did. She came and picked me and my son up. And I waited with them until my family arrived, and then I got home and I never looked back. And then I was pregnant with my second miracle, who she was honestly, is like they both played this huge purpose. You know, my son saved my life. Finding out I was pregnant with him the day before was something that I will always remember, because I would not be here today if I didn't feel that pain in my stomach and then hear those words. And then my second child was another miracle who allowed me to never go back. And so then that pregnancy was a healthy one, because I was no longer, I felt like this freedom, and I gained a lot of weight, and I was very healthy. And everyone's like, how did you go from a 5-pound baby to a 9-pound baby? I'm like, yeah, I think I was healthy. I was feeling good and free. So now and then I had 2 children at that time. So yeah.
So like during this time, would you go back to going to mass with your parents, or like did you step away from your like Sunday mass duty? Or
during that time I was, but throughout my pregnancy and when I had left for good, I was going to Sunday mass. We were praying the rosary at night, every night, things like that. And I still very much like wanted to live for God, you know? Mm-hmm. And after that time, it was like, okay, now that I have my second child, I wholeheartedly was like doing everything. Like I wanted to live for God. We had like little nights at my mom's house with some friends that were in my youth group and whatnot, that we would like watch Father Karapi videos together on a Friday night, and like we'd listen to talks and all these videos, and it was like, it was so good, you know? But then like a year went by and a year and a half went by, and I started to feel that emptiness again, where I was like, I didn't feel like all of the feelings from everything that had happened to me started to arise, and I felt like that unworthiness, that like I'm not worthy to have somebody good in my life to love me and to treat me the way that I deserved, and maybe I'll never be with anyone because like I have 2 children, and like all of these things going through my mind that were just absolutely consuming me. And so I was finishing up school in the city here. I got my last credits, got my grade 12 and graduated. And then I felt like I eventually then was entered into a 10-year relationship with somebody who at the time it was like I could see myself. It was like I wasn't going to be in this relationship because I told him my morals, my hopes, my dreams are like, I'm following Jesus 100%. But as time went on, it was like, looking back, I'm like, wow, like every week, every couple of weeks, I would like lessen those morals, those standards that I had for myself, where it was just like, I guess it doesn't need to be like that. I guess it doesn't need to be like that. And I would just give and give and give and give until I'm in a relationship that no longer glorifies God in any way. And I know in my heart that I need to be glorifying God, like in all things that I do, if I want my life to turn out well. And like, in the sense that like, I know that if I'm living in a state of mortal sin, like I can't receive communion. I can't fully accept the blessings that God has for me. And in my mind, I was like, well, it won't really affect my kids right now. Like they're young, you know. No, wrong. Like I couldn't see my self-worth for like fighting for myself. I would fight for my children to whatever degree when needed, but for myself, I couldn't see the worth anymore. And I was completely blinded by it. And so I entered this long relationship that, you know, despite obviously having good and bad times, at the end of the day, I had this emptiness and I had this feeling in my heart that was like, you can never fully receive what God has for you. You can never do it. And at this point, you know, I had entered a relationship after being through the type of abuse that I went through. It was like, how am I supposed to fully love myself in all of this? Like I can't do it. And so God, I think, knew deep down that like I needed help. I needed help getting out of the victim mindset and like really diving into the healing that I needed to begin. So in 2019, my significant other at the time of 10 years had slipped into a mental psychosis. And that was where everything really changed for me. He was in a psychosis for about 4 months straight, and they had to restart his brain to bring him back like normally. And it was absolutely traumatizing for me. And when that happened, you know, my kids are starting to get older, and he had moved out now, and he's with his family. And I remember sitting down with my children because I was like, I know my victim mindset. I know I'm going to go back once things are good, or invite him back. And I want to live for God because I want him to be healed. I want people to know Jesus. I want me to be healed. I want all of these things, and I can't do it while I'm living in the state of this sin. And so I sat down with my children, even though they're a little bit younger, and that was my way of like holding myself accountable. I just looked at them and I said, Mom hasn't been living her life for God wholeheartedly. As much as we pray the rosary every night, and you guys are in youth group and we read the Bible, and like they were exposed to so much faith, I was like, I'm not living my faith wholeheartedly, and because of that, like I'm not able to get God's blessings. And I was like, so Mom shouldn't have been living with someone before marriage, and I want to live for God and see what he has in store for me. And I was like, and I need a lot of healing. We're all going through a lot right now. They knew that we were suffering and that Dad wasn't okay at the time. And so we sat down, and like from that moment on, like we just dived into all the things to do with being Catholic. Like we were like praying 4 rosaries a day throughout the day. These kids are like coming up to me, Mom, the daycare kids are doing a craft. Should we kneel and do a decade? Like get this. And I was like, it was such a blessing because they kept me like in track. Like I could have got busy throughout the day, but we were doing daily novenas and multiple rosaries in the vehicle. We no longer listened to music because we were all fighting this trauma that we just witnessed, and this huge life change, you know, and as hard as some nights were when you're seeing your kids like cry and, you know, ask what is going on, like why is our family like this now? I don't have a dad, and all these things. We had this unimaginable strength that like only God can give, and it was the very reason that we continued on. Like I said, every vehicle ride, they'd turn off the music and we'd be like, let's pray the rosary. And like sometimes we'd get a little silly and like start singing it, you know, sing a decade here and there. And we just had this joy. Like we had, amidst the absolute craziest storm that I felt, we had this unspeakable joy. And it was something really beautiful to get us through what was really going on behind scenes. So,
and during this time, this is when the boyfriend was still in the hospital?
Yeah, so we were no longer together, but I felt like I had to help to whatever degree, and maybe I gave a little more than I should have, looking back, like in the sense of I just gave till I had nothing left, and I didn't take care of myself. So I exposed myself to seeing so many traumatic things in that hospital, and just endless hours of like it sucking the absolute life out of me, that like I knew, okay, me going, am I helping? Probably not, but I'm going to be supportive. And in my mind, that was like what I kept telling myself. I'm the type of person that like you fight for people that you love, and you know, maybe God has a plan for us to be back together. Like I don't know what God has, but in my mind, like I knew I wanted something. I wanted to be loved properly, and it had to be God at the center of both of our lives. And so, yeah, it was really just a difficult situation of me helping somebody that I love, but also knowing that like God's calling me to let go. And so it took me a few years of that. And so I fast forward to 2022, which at this point, after my ex had gotten better, and by better, I just mean, you know, he still struggles with this mental illness, but he had become like okay for a while. I still had my children full time and still do. And but I sat there and I realized like I'm really depressed. Like what is God doing in my life? Like I thought right now I'd have somebody helping me. I thought by now I have 3 children, and like I thought he'd heal him. And I just had all these thoughts going through my mind like, where do you want me, God? Like I don't understand why I feel worse than when I was 16. And that's the other thing, is that everything started getting brought up at this point. It was like I finally started, you know, I gave my life to God. I'm like reliving for him wholeheartedly. And like we did this huge house clean, and I'm like doing all the things. I'm like, why do I feel like I'm getting worse, you know? Mm-hmm. But I really feel like it's because I had stuffed everything down. And now God's like, we're going to gently bring up all this stuff, and I'm going to walk you through it, and I'll hold your hand. And there's maybe moments where I didn't feel like my hand was being held, but I had so many people, like on the days that I felt like giving up again, like I had even like you, there would just be a message from you that you just said like, I'm praying for you. Like, how are you doing? And it was like those little things once every month of like some random person that would reach out was like, you are loved. God's holding your hand. It is messy. It is horrible right now, but like you have people that are like thinking of you and you're worth fighting for whatever this is. And so just when I thought that I was at my absolute worst, in April of 2022, I stepped into a business for an appointment, and I was sexually assaulted. And that was the tip of like the iceberg for me. Like I was angry. I was so disheartened that this could happen again. And when I got home, I thought my parents would have been gone already because my kids at the time could stay on their own. But they were still there, and I remember them saying like, "How was your appointment?" And I just broke down, and I had like a 4-hour panic attack, which resulted in me losing my voice. And that was probably the most terrifying thing to this day. Like, despite the abuse I've been through, not feeling like something happening to me took something away that I cherish and I love to do and talk and all these things, that was taken away from me now because of it was at the hands of some random person. I was so angry. And so I had lost my voice for 9 days, and I was taken to the hospital, and they said it's a trauma response because of the abuse you went through before. It will come back, but we don't know when. And I just remember being like, what? And so I now have resentment. I have anger. I am mad. There's some days where, I don't think I ever like yelled at God. I yelled like in general, being like, why, God? Like, why is this happening to me? But while I'm yelling, like I still had this inkling in my heart where it was like, I already know God's crying over this. Like he's weeping with me. He didn't want that to happen, and he's here with me, and that I know that he can take all of this pain away if he wanted to. He could do anything, but there's a purpose or a reason behind it, and I don't understand it. And I know that he's with me and that he didn't want this to happen. And that is like one of the main things that kept me going, is that my parents really planted in my heart growing, like once my brother was dealing with addictions, that like, if we turn to God, he can turn anything bad into something beautiful. And that, for those who love and trust the Lord, like he is there. He's going to be with you and he's going to help you. And so I had that in my heart at all times, as long as we're living for God. So in my mind, I'm like, I have to be living for God. I have to be, because without it, I know that I'm going to just completely slip off this earth again. And I can't do that. Now my kids are older. They're seeing me at my absolute worst. And it was awful. It was a really awful year. So it fast forward to 2023.
So when about was that? Was that like, because I remember getting texts from you, and it would have been like getting close to June of 2022, because I remember I was about to have another baby.
Yeah.
And you were at a very, very low point.
Yeah.
And I was really worried for you.
Yeah. That summer after that happened was, like I said, like I almost took my life again, and I was now 31 years old, and I couldn't believe that this is where I was at. And I have 3 beautiful children who are my world and who have this faith that is so strong. And I'm like, I'm blessed. Why am I feeling this way? Why is nothing getting easier? Why am I not having some type of relief? And I remember like, I was scared for myself. So I know there was moments where I think you and my parents were the only people that I would send like a message that kind of seemed like I didn't want to be here anymore. And I was waiting because I'm like, I want someone to be concerned for me, because I'm concerned to be alone. Like I don't trust myself anymore. Mm-hmm. And so that was like such a horrible year. And honestly, like I said, it was messages like from a friend or a parishioner or my family that would just like keep me going. But I was a disaster. I had severe PTSD at this point, so bad that I was having anywhere from 7 to 15 episodes a day. And during every episode, like I would lose my hearing. I would have a panic attack. It was really bad.
And you were running a daycare at this point, and I remember you would say like you couldn't even like go and be with the kids. Like it was just the sound, all of anything would just overwhelm you.
So for someone who doesn't know anything about symptoms, what were you experiencing? So
for PTSD, it would be like, I guess at the time, like if it was too loud, if there was a mess, like if I walked into the house and there were shoes everywhere, that would set it off. And what would happen was all of a sudden I would start losing my hearing. It'd be like that sharp shooting pain in your ears. Like, I don't know if you've ever watched a movie or a war movie and you kind of hear like those where everything gets kind of fuzzy. And I would lose, like, even my vision would go blurry. I'd have to go into the bathroom and like wet myself on my forehead with cold water. And I'd have to sit down, and I sometimes I felt like I was going to pass out. Other times I would just start having a panic attack. And that would happen now at this point over anything. Like going to the grocery store was impossible for me. Mm-hmm. If my daughter was pulling at me to be like, hey, like, can we get this? I'd be like, shush, stop, you guys. And then I'd be like, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't want to be like this. Like it got so bad that I felt like, how am I doing any good to these children right now? Like, I'm so not okay, and I'm triggered by absolutely everything. I couldn't play a board game with my kids anymore. The rolling the dice, and if someone talked over me, I'm having a full-on PTSD episode. So I'd walk away and they'd be like, well, Mom, we really want to play with you. And I'm like, and I'd cry to them and be like, I'm trying to get you guys to understand what's going on, but I don't know. And I always tell them, I know God's going to step in. It feels like it's been forever. I know he's going to step in. I don't know when. And I'm praying. I'm trying so hard, you guys. I'm sorry that I'm not the best mother right now. I'm so sorry you guys are suffering. I'm so sorry you're seeing me like this. And like, we'd have these big heart-to-hearts, and like, we would hug and cry and like feel okay. And then like next day, repeat, like over and over and over again. Like, my mom was basically working full time for me because I needed to step out of the way all the time because I couldn't do it anymore. And I felt like I could no longer function. And I knew that if I was going to go to the hospital, or let's say to get help, and be like, I can't do this. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. That I would give up on myself. Like, I really felt like that would be it. I was in that hospital fighting for a loved one for years on and off. And I seen the horrific things that can go on there. And, you know, and I just like, I couldn't do that. I was like, if I go there, that's it for me. I'm like, I'm never coming out. Then what? My parents have 3 kids now full time. And it was really, really, really bad. And I think when fast forward now to 2023, like, this has gone on a year now at least. And my mom is telling me about this retreat coming up. And I was like, I've done all the things. I've went to all the retreats. I go to mass, and I get prayed with people, and people are praying for me on the phone, and nothing. I'm like, Mom, like, I don't want to go anywhere. I literally just would sulk, you know, like I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror anymore without feeling absolute disgust. Like my body, or me looking at me in the mirror, was like I was seeing a version of something that was an object, and I couldn't even look at it anymore. Like, I couldn't feel anything good about myself. And it like I said, it got so bad that even my kids had to ask permission to hug me. And that was the hardest. That was one of the hardest things, looking back, being like, I'm a very huggable person, and I love hugging my kids. And Lily would always hold my hand, and none of that could happen anymore without asking permission. And it broke my heart that my kids are having to do this. But I'm doing all the things to get better. I felt like I'm doing all of it, but nothing was changing. And so this retreat came up, and I ended up pushing myself to go. And honestly, if I have to explain what it was that was, I think, chaining me, it was all of the anger, all of the resentment, all of the pain. I would tell God I'm giving it to him, but I wasn't. Like, I was holding on to being so angry. And people don't realize like how much resentment and anger and that unforgiveness is like, it make you sick. It can make you physically sick, you know? And even though I have all the reasons to be the way that I was, of the things that I went through, it was like, how can I forgive these people? How do I forgive people that are doing this? Like, this world seems absolutely crazy, and how do I begin to let that go and whatnot? So I went to this 4-evening retreat, and on the last day we did all the prayers. You know, I went to confession, and we had adoration every night. We did the deliverance prayers to like just let go and break anything that we're holding on to that isn't of God. And I remember at the end of it, I like went home and I texted my mom, and I just said, well, I'm still the same. And I remember she didn't answer me. she was probably just like, I'm not engaging with this, because I had been in such a dark place. Like nobody wanted to get a text from me. It was just dark stuff that I couldn't do this anymore, you know? And I bless my parents, because they had it really rough with me. They were the main people that I had as an outlet, and it was not, they needed a lot of strength, I tell you that. So, but then the next day, I woke up and it was a Saturday, and I remember still feeling the same way at the time, but I was crying and grieving, but it was like it felt like I was grieving. That was the thing. It didn't feel like I was crying because I was depressed. It felt like I was grieving something. And I just remember feeling something off and different than my normal type of cry. And I was just like, okay. And my parents took the kids for the day, and we had supper with the people that came to do the retreat that evening, and they prayed with us. And I remember during my prayer, they just said, God's going to use you in such a special way. And like, you really need to write your music again. And like all of these things, you have a beautiful voice. And I just remember I sat there like, okay, sure. Like, I'm not really taking anything in that they're saying. And they were like telling me like, you have shame. I can see it. And like, God's taken that away from you now. And I was like, no, he hasn't. Like, I remember whispering to myself, like, no, he hasn't. Like, I'm still not okay. Like, I barely could go to that supper. I'm like crying. I'm like a mess. And they're just sitting there like, no, like, you're okay. And I was like, they're like, go home, spend time with God, write music. And I looked at them, I was like, I cannot write music. I can't play the piano right now. My mind has every memory on replay in my brain. Like, it felt like it was broken. And they were just like, no, but you just went through the retreat, and you did you did the deliverance prayers and all of these things, and you went to confession, and like, believe that God has something for you, like that you're going to be set free from whatever you were holding on to, all of pain. And I was like, okay, this is kind of silly. Like, I don't believe anything they're saying. And so I ended up going to bed, waking up Sunday morning, and I remember I woke up and I didn't have a single thought in my head. And that was unheard of. Like, I don't remember the last time several years before that I didn't have something going through my head. And I thought, this is a joke. Like, I went and made coffee, and I was like, I'm not telling anyone. Like, this is just temporary. Like, God's just trying to trick me, Like, I'm just thinking of all the things.
You think this is a really good thing here? Like, when you say there's nothing in your head, this is
a good thing. Yeah. I like don't have a thought. I have peace. I'm not thinking of the most traumatic events that have happened to me. I'm not thinking of them anymore. And I was so sick of thinking of them. Like, I felt like my brain was broken. Like, that I was like, it was just on a replay, and I'm like, I'm going crazy. I'm going to be those crazy ladies. Like, I'm going to be one of them. And I'm like, and there's going to be no hope for me. Like, what is this? What do you want me to do, God? And so there was no thoughts in my head, which was just beautiful. And for the first time in Mass that day, I was able to focus on Mass and listen to the readings and not be on the verge of crying or breaking down. And I was like, okay. And then a week went by, and I finally was on a Zoom call with my counselor, who had been counseling me weekly for well over a year at this point, like weekly. And she was like, I had a list every week of every person that triggered me, every PTSD episode. So there's like a long list every week. And she would just be like, in my mind, I'm like, poor lady. Like, how can she even help me? I'm just telling her the same episodes that are happening weekly. And so I got on, and the first thing she says to me was, what's different? And I was like, what? And she's like, you have life in your eyes. And I was like, oh, well, I think I experienced a healing, but I don't know. It probably is just fake, I said. And then she goes, you have been lifeless every time you hop on this video. Like, there's no life in your eyes, Alicia. Like, she goes, I was actually coming on this time to tell you I have to refer you to a psychiatrist, because they're probably going to need to monitor you with medication, because like, I feel like you're getting worse. And I was like, I was. And she's like, you have life. You have nothing to tell me. No episodes. I was like, I haven't had an episode in 5 days. And she was like, that is a medical miracle with how many you are having every day. That's impossible, absolutely impossible, even with medication, to not have them just completely gone. And I remember looking at her being like, I don't want to tell anyone, because what if it's fake? And she's like, no, you proclaim it. You go tell everyone what God just did for you. You've been completely healed, and you have so many good things coming for you. And I remember being like, okay, well, I didn't tell anyone yet. I didn't even tell my kids. They're still asking permission to hug me, and I'm scared to tell them. And so 3 weeks had went by, and I finally were in the kitchen, and Lily comes up to me and says, "Can I have a hug?" And I just grabbed her, and I was like, "You don't have to ask permission anymore." And she's like, "What? Why?" And she called the other kids down, and I was like, "Because I've been healed. Like, I have zero PTSD. I have no anxiety, no depression." I was like, I woke up one morning and I was completely changed. And I was like, I can look at myself in the mirror and I can actually say the word that, like, I am worthy. I deserve to be treated with love and respect. And I could never, ever say that before to myself. And it was just something so beautiful. So the kids, they put on, Lily goes to the speaker and she puts on I'm So Blessed, and it's like this like kind of upbeat song, and it's like, on my worst day I'm a child of God, on my best day I'm a child of God. She's jumping around and singing, and we're all just crying and like jumping around singing, being like, and I remember the song ended and they were like, "We have our mom back." And I was like, God did that. And I was like, and even though I don't understand why I maybe suffered so long, and here I thought I was alone, I was like, but I wasn't. Like, I wasn't alone. I always had people in my corner, and God was carrying me through it. And I don't even want to know why I had, like, because I knew that God could step in and do the absolute unimaginable, and that he can still shed light into our lives despite the bad. I don't care how long I suffered, because in my heart I knew that God could do this, and then he did it, and I was like, that's the God that we serve. How could we ever not serve anyone else ever again, you know? And so he's been my, since then I made a decision. I was like, I will never be ashamed to tell people of everything. And there might be people going through a really dark time, and they're wondering the same things that I did for so long. And sometimes they just need to be reminded that, like, our God is so good. And despite what you're going through, he can turn any horrible thing into something beautiful. And that's what he did for me. And I'm now 34 years old, and I'm living my absolute best life. And I know it took a while to get here, but I have the most amazing children who constantly remind me of God's goodness, and that somehow they continue to trust God despite seeing me at my absolute worst, you know? And so then I started singing. I started writing music for God. I started leading adoration, and I was asked to speak internationally in New York, and I shared my testimony, and God's just been doing so many good things in my life. And that doesn't mean that I don't have bad days, or like on my worst day, I know that the enemy is going to use my self-worth and my mind to attack me. But I know that I have authority in his name, and that I'm going to push through it, because there's just, I know 1,000,000% that God can use me despite whatever I'm going through, and that he's going to, I need to tell the world about it, you know?
There seemed to be that moment after the retreat, like a special grace that happened to you just when you woke up. Yeah. Just listening to your story, it seemed like I don't know if there's some diabolical influence combined with like God's healing in your life, but for you, there was a clear distinction from going to bed and then waking up. Yeah. Explain a little bit more the difference between before and after.
So before, I literally was, like I said, it felt like a broken record going on in my brain. I never could think of something specific. It was whatever it was thinking. Like, I think you guys might have remembered that I kind of stopped going to my parish even, because if I saw someone I knew and someone might have said like, "How are you?" I was going to like burst and like trauma dump everything. Like, I was going to tell you memories from when I was 16, memories from 2022, everything going on in my brain. Like, it was just never ending. Like, my brain did not stop. So I didn't sleep. I would get up anywhere from 7 to 10 times a night, just tossing and turning and standing up and thinking of the same thoughts over and over again. And the PTSD was the main thing that I suffered with. Like, it was so bad. Like, I could never have a conversation with a male, even God bless my dad. He has never, I don't think I've ever heard him raise his voice at me. So I never had to like feel that from him. But if another male in my life would, you know, raise their voice at me, PTSD, like so bad, lose my hearing. I'd have to walk away. It would be like the biggest ordeal just happened to me in my mind. And I had zero control over it. Like I just looked like a mess. So like going to sleep, thinking of all of these crazy things and feeling like, God, just take me off this earth again. My kids are so much better without me, because that's what, like, horrible intrusive thoughts just going in my mind over and over. And then I woke up and there was not a thought in my mind. It was night and day. I can't describe it any other way other than like I was absolutely miserable and non-functionable to completely, like I felt like God gave me a brand new mind and a brand new set of eyes to look through at everybody, and a way to like view myself, view others. Like I was like, what? I've never looked through these types of eyes before. Like, what is this? And it was just so beautiful.
So now it seems like God's opening up doors for you to share like your story, and also just to glorify God, to build this kingdom. So what would you say has happened in, like, even in the last like 6 months in terms of like ministry?
Yeah. So earlier this year, I had been praying, like I knew that I wanted to start a ministry and I wanted to share God's goodness and I wanted to share my music, and I didn't know what that entailed a whole, like 100%, but I just knew I wanted to do it. So earlier this year, I came up with my ministry name, which was His Grace Ministries. And that was because it was His grace that continuously leads me. Like His grace is the reason that I was able to look at myself in a different way. His grace has set me free. His grace has always been something in my life that like we don't deserve, but He gives it freely, you know? And so that I started kind of making things with that logo, designing it and all the things. And I had been brought back to New York twice last year, and I was leading music there. And then this year I started leading adoration at a parish in our city. And I was like, wow, like, okay. And it was just kind of weird how it opened up, because no one knew that I did that. And so I just remember speaking to the person at the church, and he's like, I don't know why I'm asking you to lead. I haven't even heard you sing, really. And I was like, I don't know why you're asking me either. And I was like, but I would love to, because I've been praying, like, where's an opportunity that I can, like, I love leading adoration. Like, to me, it's life-giving for me. Like, it's healing for me to, like, go and sing in front of the Blessed Sacrament. And so it was just something I really enjoyed doing. And then this year, or I guess last year in New York, I had met a spiritual director, Father Nathan, and he's been a true blessing. He will pray with me whenever I need. He agreed to help me along the journey, and he's excited to see what, my ministry comes of. And then this summer, we decided to put on a conference, like a healing conference in New Mexico, and that's where he's from. And so we planned that, and he took me down there, and I was able to speak and give my testimony and speak on God's healing and lead music for them. And then since then, I've just been getting opportunity after opportunity, and I'm still hoping that eventually I can do this more and share of what God's done for me. So
You have a CD available?
Yeah, so it's going to be ready within 4 to 5 weeks now. I have an option that you can like pre-buy, pre-save one. And then if you're not in the city, I just take your address and everything and I mail it out to you. And if you are, then it's free local pickup kind of thing. It's just by donation. So this is to help me start my ministry. I'm transitioning from full-time daycare into like next to no kids basically to start doing this full-time. I'm in like the waiting period right now where I have like a couple of kids to sustain me, but I'm able to do all the things, and I'm getting my social media page up and running, taking a little longer than I'd like, but it's getting there. And yeah, the songs on the CD are like worship songs. So it'll be my one original song that I have shared after my testimony usually. It's called Saved. And I wrote this song when I was 17, like right after I had Caden. And it's basically my testimony from then in a song of like what God spoke to me through that. And then the rest of the music on the CD will be just worship songs that I play during adoration. And then my next CD hopefully will be all my originals. So
we'll put your contact information on the screen so people can reach out to you by email, because this is not a local podcast. Right? So they can reach out to you that way. We'll put your contact information in the description of the video in case somebody wants to reach out to you. And if somebody wants to, and I would hope that someone watching this and they looking for a pro-life speaker. I heard you speaking, giving your story a little while ago. It was just so moving. I really hope people watching today, if they need you to speak at a pro-life conference, that they reach out to you. And I would have to say, just regarding your music, your voice, I've done a lot of music. We've done 6 CDs together, I think. And I don't consider myself very strong, but I would have to say, when I heard your voice, you're one of the strongest lead female vocalists I've ever heard. You have a real gift, and so people should know that. Again, I was so blessed to hear you speak and sing in Saskatoon at this conference just recently.
And I know our daughter, who's 13, she went to a camp recently, and her highlight of the camp was hearing your story. So so just
she even heard her dad speak, but it was like, no, it was Alicia.
So anyhow, so thank you for being willing to share, and your story is really vulnerable, but I think that people can relate on so many different levels, whether it's the abuse, whether it's the trauma, the PTSD, or whether it's just your self-worth, because people still struggle with self-worth, even if they haven't been through the same degree of trauma. But so I just thank you so much for just sharing such a beautiful story and to give glory to God, because that's ultimately what our lives are meant to be a constant, beautiful gift back to the Father. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And thank you for coming to our rosary nights.
Yes, I love it.
With your kids.
Yeah,
we love them.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to hear my testimony in a song, click right here.